The rain drummed against the tall windows of the Cetera Music Manufacturing Building with a relentless rhythm that seemed to echo the anxiety pounding in Peter's chest. He stood in his corner office on the 4th floor, watching the Chicago skyline blur through the Water Street glass, his weathered hands gripping a stack of legal documents that could destroy everything he had built over the past 15 years. The letterhead read, Morrison, Klein and Associates, Corporate Acquisitions, and the words swimming before his eyes were devastating. Notice of hostile takeover attempt, breach of contract, asset liquidation, immediate cessation of operations. His small but successful company, which manufactured custom acoustic guitars and vintage-style keyboards for independent musicians and studios across the Midwest, was about to be swallowed whole by Titan Industries, a massive conglomerate that specialized in buying struggling businesses, stripping them for parts and leaving empty buildings in their wake. At 71 years old, Peter had thought his fighting days were behind him. After his legendary career with Chicago and his successful solo years, he had poured his heart and remaining energy into this company, wanting to give back to the music community that had given him so much. But now, through a series of legal maneuvers he barely understood, some corporate sharks had found a way to challenge the ownership of his building, claiming that his lease agreement from 2008 contained clauses that allowed for forced buyouts under certain market conditions. The worst part wasn't losing the money, though the financial blow would be significant. The worst part was thinking about the 43 employees who depended on this place for their livelihoods. People like Martha, the 60-year-old secretary who had been with him since the beginning. People like Carlos, the master craftsman who could make a guitar sing like no one else Peter had ever met. People like young Danny, the shipping coordinator who was working his way through community college and supporting his disabled mother. A soft knock on his office door interrupted his dark thoughts. Mr. Cetera, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have those files you requested. The voice belonged to Jenny Morrison, the 22-year-old intern who had started working in their archives department just 3 months ago. She was a quiet, serious young woman studying library science at Northwestern, and she had taken on the massive project of digitizing and organizing the company's 15 years of accumulated paperwork. "Come in, Jenny," Peter said, turning away from the window and trying to compose himself. He didn't want his employees to see how worried he was, especially not the younger ones who still believed that hard work and dedication would always be enough to overcome any obstacle. Jenny entered carrying a large cardboard box that appeared to be quite heavy. She was a small woman, probably no more than 5 feet 3 inches tall, with straight brown hair that she always wore, pulled back in a practical ponytail and wire-rimmed glasses that gave her a studious appearance. Despite her youth, there was something remarkably mature about her demeanor, a seriousness of purpose that reminded Peter of himself at that age. "I've been going through the basement storage room like you asked," she said, setting the box down carefully on his desk. "Most of it is just old invoices and purchase orders, but I found something interesting. There's a whole section of files that seem to be from before you officially took ownership of this building. Legal documents, correspondence, things that go back to the early 2000s. Peter looked at the box with mild interest, though his mind was still consumed with the immediate crisis. Probably just leftover paperwork from the previous owner. Nothing that would matter now. "Maybe," Jenny said, but there was something in her voice that made Peter look at her more carefully. "But some of these documents, they don't seem like regular business files. There are letters, personal correspondence, things that look like they might be important. I thought maybe you should see them before I file them away permanently." Despite his preoccupation with the takeover attempt, Peter found himself curious about Jenny's discovery. She had proven to be remarkably thorough and intuitive in her archival work, often finding connections and patterns that others had missed. If she thought something was worth his attention, it probably was. "Show me what you found," he said, moving closer to his desk. Jenny carefully removed the top layer of files from the box, revealing manila folders that were clearly much older than anything else in their company records. The paper was yellowed with age, and some of the folders were bound with string in a way that suggested they dated back decades rather than years. This first folder contains correspondence between the previous building owner, a man named Robert Kellerman, and various legal representatives, Jenny explained, opening the folder with careful hands. But look at this letter from 2003. She handed Peter a piece of letterhead that read, Kellerman Holdings, LLC, at the top. The letter was addressed to someone named David Morrison at Morrison, Klein and Associates, the same law firm that was now attempting to take over Peter's company. Peter felt his pulse quicken as he began to read the letter. It was a detailed communication about a private agreement regarding the building that housed Peter's company, including specific clauses about protection from hostile acquisition attempts and grandfather rights for any legitimate business tenant operating continuously for more than 10 years. Jenny, Peter said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. Where did you find this? In a sealed box behind the old furnace in the basement, she replied. It was hidden behind some pipes, like someone had deliberately concealed it. There are dozens more letters like this, plus some other documents that I think might be contracts or agreements. Peter's hands were trembling slightly as he continued reading. The letter explicitly mentioned that any tenant who operated a legitimate business in the building for more than a decade would be granted permanent tenancy rights that could not be violated by future ownership changes or corporate acquisition attempts. How many years have you been in this building, Mr. Cetra? Jenny asked quietly. 15 years, Peter said, his mind racing. We've been here for 15 years, paying rent every month, building our business, employing local people. According to this letter, we should have legal protection against exactly what Titan Industries is trying to do to us. Jenny nodded and pulled out another folder. There's more, much more. It looks like Robert Kellerman was very concerned about protecting small businesses from corporate predators. He seems to have built multiple safeguards into his leasing agreements, but for some reason, these documents were never included in the official building records. Peter felt a surge of hope for the first time in weeks. Why would these documents be hidden? Why wouldn't they be part of the public record? I think I might know, Jenny said, her voice taking on an edge of anger that Peter had never heard from her before. Look at this correspondence from 2007. She handed him another letter, this one from David Morrison to Robert Kellerman. The tone was completely different from the earlier communications. Cold, threatening, almost sinister. Morrison was demanding that Kellerman reconsider his position regarding tenant protections and suggesting that certain documents might need to be removed from official records to facilitate future business arrangements. It looks like Morrison was pressuring Kellerman to eliminate the tenant protections so that future acquisitions would be easier, Jenny explained. But based on these hidden files, it appears that Kellerman refused to cooperate and instead hid the original documents to protect future tenants. Peter sat down heavily in his chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what Jenny had discovered. This could change everything. If these documents are authentic and legally binding, Titan Industries has no right to force us out of this building. There's something else, Jenny said, pulling out a thick folder that was bound with a red ribbon. This contains what appears to be Robert Kellerman's personal journal from those years. I haven't read all of it, but the entries I did read, they're about you, Mr. Cetra. About me? Peter looked up in surprise. I never met Robert Kellerman. All my lease negotiations were handled through a property management company. Jenny opened the journal to a page marked with a yellow sticky note. Listen to this entry from September 2008. The famous musician Peter Cetera has signed a lease for the 4th floor. I've followed his career since the Chicago days, and I believe he represents exactly the kind of artist and entrepreneur I want to protect with these building safeguards. His music has brought joy to millions of people, and now he's trying to create opportunities for other musicians through his manufacturing business. I'm going to make sure the tenant protection clauses are ironclad, so that no corporate vulture can ever destroy what he's building here." Peter felt his throat constrict with emotion. Here was a man he had never met, someone who had cared enough about his mission to build legal protections around it, to ensure that his small business would be safe from exactly the kind of predatory takeover they were facing now. "Keep reading," Jenny said softly. "There's more." She turned to another marked page. December 2008. "Morrison and his associates continue to pressure me to remove the tenant protections, but I refuse. They don't understand that some things are more important than profit margins. Peter Cetera's company employs dozens of local people, creates beautiful instruments that help artists make music, and represents the kind of small business that built this country. I would rather lose money on this building than betray the trust of someone who has given so much to the world." Peter had to wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. The generosity and foresight of this stranger, this Robert Kellerman, who had believed in his mission enough to risk his own financial interests, was almost overwhelming. "What happened to him?" Peter asked. "To Kellerman?" Jenny's expression grew sad. According to the final entries in the journal, he died in early 2009, just a few months after you signed your lease. The building ownership transferred to his estate, which eventually sold it to a management company. But it appears that Morrison and his firm were involved in handling the estate sale, and that's probably when they buried these documents. "They've been planning this for 15 years, Peter said. The full scope of the conspiracy becoming clear. They waited until Kellerman was dead, buried the documents that would protect tenants like me, and then waited for the right moment to strike." "It looks that way," Jenny agreed. "But Mr. Cetera, now that we have these documents, we can fight back. These papers prove that your tenancy is legally protected, that Titan Industries has no right to force you out." Peter looked at Jenny with growing admiration and gratitude. This young woman, barely out of college, working as an intern for little more than minimum wage, had potentially saved his entire company through her diligent, thorough work. Without her commitment to properly organizing their archives, these crucial documents would have remained hidden forever. "Jenny," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "do you understand what you've done? You've not only saved my company, you've saved the livelihoods of 43 people. You've preserved 15 years of work, countless hours of craftsmanship, a legacy that I thought was about to be destroyed." Jenny blushed and adjusted her glasses nervously. "I was just doing my job, Mr. Cetera. I believe in being thorough." "No," Peter said firmly. "This was far beyond the call of duty. You could have just filed these old papers away without looking at them carefully. Most people would have, but you took the time to read through everything, to understand what you were looking at, to recognize the significance of what you had found." He stood up and walked to the window again, but this time the view looked completely different. The rain was still falling, but it no longer seemed ominous. Instead, it felt cleansing, washing away the fear and despair that had been consuming him for weeks. "Tell me about yourself, Jenny," Peter said, turning back to face her. "What made you want to work in archives? What draws you to this kind of detailed, careful work?" Jenny looked surprised by the personal question. Throughout her 3 months at the company, their interactions had been strictly professional. "I've always loved research and organization," she said. "There's something satisfying about bringing order to chaos, about finding the connections that other people miss. My professors say I have a natural talent for archival science. Are you planning to make this your career, working in libraries and archives?" "That's the goal," Jenny said, though Peter detected a note of uncertainty in her voice. "I mean, assuming I can find a good position after graduation. The field is pretty competitive, and most of the positions require advanced degrees and years of experience." Peter studied her face, seeing something in her expression that reminded him of his younger self. Ambitious, talented, but uncertain about the future. Worried about whether there would be opportunities for someone with passion, but limited experience. "What if I told you that I want to offer you a permanent position here?" Peter said. "Not as an intern, but as our company archivist and research director. A real job with real responsibility, and a salary that reflects the value of what you bring to this organization." Jenny's eyes widened behind her glasses. "Mr. Cetra, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for that kind of position." "You just saved my company from corporate predators through your archival skills and attention to detail," Peter said with a smile. "I'd say you're more than qualified. Besides, I have a feeling that this discovery is just the beginning. If Morrison and his associates have been playing these kinds of games with our building, they've probably been doing it to other small businesses as well. We're going to need someone with your skills to help us fight back." The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. Peter called his own lawyer, a sharp woman named Rebecca Santos, who specialized in small business protection. When she arrived and reviewed the documents that Jenny had discovered, her reaction was immediate and decisive. "This is a slam dunk," Rebecca said, spreading the papers across Peter's conference table. "These documents create an ironclad legal framework that protects your tenancy. Titan Industries has no legal basis for their takeover attempt. In fact, based on what I'm seeing here, they may be guilty of fraud and conspiracy." "What's our next move?" Peter asked. The celebration on the 4th floor was a swirl of faces, laughter, and clinking glasses. But for Peter, it was a quiet moment. He and Jenny stood apart from the main group, their conversation a private island in a sea of public triumph. The decade since that first discovery had been a testament to her growth, a blossoming from a nervous intern into a confident, compassionate leader. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not just the accomplished doctor, Jennifer Morrison, but the ghost of the shy young woman who had changed his life forever. "You know what I'm most proud of?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "It's not the companies we've saved or the recognition we've received. It's the fact that we've proven that good people doing good work can still make a difference. In a world that sometimes seems dominated by greed and shortcuts, that's a message worth preserving." Her words resonated deeply with Peter, echoing his own long-held beliefs. He had always tried to run his company with integrity, but the Kellerman case had been a brutal reminder of how fragile that integrity could be against the forces of ruthless ambition. Jenny's work, however, was a shield, a proactive measure to ensure that such battles wouldn't have to be fought alone. When the party wound down, Peter took a moment to wander the halls of the building. The very walls seemed to hum with a new energy. This was no longer just a place of business. It was a monument to resilience, a physical embodiment of a moral victory. He passed by the old records room, the very place where Jenny had made her pivotal find. It was now a modern, brightly lit collaboration space, but he could still picture the dusty boxes, the faint scent of old paper, and the quiet determination of a young woman who saw value in what others had dismissed. The following day, Peter met with the board of his company to discuss the future. His successor, a brilliant and ethical young woman named Sarah, had already been leading the company with a steady hand. Peter's role had become more advisory, but he wanted to ensure the legacy of the victory lived on in the company's culture. "I want to establish a scholarship," he proposed, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. "The Robert Kellerman Archival Excellence Grant. Now, it will be for students in business and information science, encouraging them to specialize in document preservation and corporate accountability. We'll partner with Jenny's organization to help select the recipients." The board unanimously approved the idea. Peter knew it was a small thing, a symbolic gesture, but it was another brick in the foundation of the world he and Jenny were building. A world where information was a tool for justice, not a weapon of suppression. Over the next few years, the partnership between Peter's company and Jenny's organization, now named the Kellerman Institute, deepened. The grant attracted some of the brightest minds in the country, and the recipients often went on to work for the institute, creating a pipeline of dedicated professionals committed to the cause. Jenny's work expanded, tackling not just corporate malfeasance, but also historical injustices, helping communities reclaim their pasts by uncovering buried documents related to land rights, civil rights, and cultural heritage. Her team used cutting-edge technology like AI-powered document analysis and digital forensic tools to comb through vast archives, but the core of their work remained the same: human curiosity and a belief in the power of a single piece of paper. Peter, now a grandfather himself, spent his days tending to his garden and serving on the Kellerman Institute's board. He watched as Jenny became a truly international figure, speaking at the United Nations about the importance of information access and preservation as a human right. She was often featured in magazines and on television, her story becoming a modern fable about the power of diligent work and moral courage. One crisp autumn afternoon, Peter sat on his porch, a mug of tea warming his hands, and read a glowing profile of Jenny in a national magazine. The article detailed her latest victory, the recovery of a small town's founding documents that had been deliberately hidden by a powerful real estate developer. The documents had been crucial in proving the town's land claims, saving it from being bulldozed for a new development. He smiled, a deep, contented expression. The article ended with a quote from Jenny. "My mentor, Peter, always told me that information wants to be found. I've come to believe that it's our job to be the ones who help it emerge from the shadows. Every document, no matter how old or seemingly insignificant, is a piece of a story. And every story deserves to be told." Peter felt a pang of pride so sharp it almost brought a tear to his eye. She had taken his simple observation and built an entire life's work upon it. She had found her purpose in the dusty corners of a basement and had shown the world that quiet, careful work could have the loudest impact. The phone rang, and it was Jenny. "Peter," she said, her voice filled with a familiar energy. "I have to tell you something. We just launched a new project. We're calling it the Kellerman Legacy Initiative. It's a massive digital archive of case studies, all the successful recoveries we've made. We're making it open source, so anyone, anywhere in the world, can learn from our methods and apply them to their own communities." Peter listened, his heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Jenny. You're building a library for justice." "Exactly," she said, her smile audible over the phone line. "And we're naming the first wing after you. The Peter Reynolds Wing for Corporate Integrity." Peter laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Because none of this would have happened without you. You were the one who saw the value in a nervous intern and a box of old papers. You believed in me before I even knew how to believe in myself." As the years passed, the Peter Reynolds Wing for Corporate Integrity became a hub of activity at the Kellerman Institute. It was a physical space, filled with sleek computers and collaborative workspaces, but it was also a philosophy. On its walls hung framed quotes from Robert Kellerman's original writings and from Jenny's own thesis, a constant reminder of the principles that guided their work. Jenny, now in her late 30s, had indeed taken over a major university archive, but she had restructured it to serve as the academic and research arm of the institute. Her students were no longer just learning about document preservation. They were actively participating in real-world cases, applying theoretical knowledge to help real people. One such case came from a small town in rural Appalachia. A coal company facing a lawsuit over environmental damage claimed they had no records from a specific period. The town's history and the health of its residents depended on proving the company's complicity. Jenny assigned a team of her most promising students to the case and they traveled to the small, dusty county courthouse. For weeks, they sifted through microfiche and handwritten ledgers, facing dead ends and discouragement. But Jenny had taught them to be patient, to look for the ghosts in the archives, the documents that were missing not by accident, but by design. Marcus's breakthrough wasn't just a win in court. It was a seismic event that sent ripples far beyond the small, affected town. The discovery of the deliberately hidden environmental studies became a case study at law schools across the country. Jenny, now a celebrated figure in environmental law, was invited to speak at the Kellerman Institute's annual gala, an event she had once attended as a wide-eyed student. Standing on the same stage where Peter had introduced her to the world of public interest law, she spoke not of her own achievements, but of the young man she now mentored. "Marcus," she said, her voice clear and resonant, "is the embodiment of a simple truth. Diligence is a form of justice. He didn't find a smoking gun. He found a quiet, dusty piece of paper and gave it the voice it had been denied for decades." The spotlight that followed was uncomfortable for Marcus, a person more at home in the quiet solitude of an archive than in front of a camera. But Jenny, remembering her own initial shyness, guided him. She made sure he understood that his newfound visibility was a tool, a platform to inspire others. Together, they launched a pro bono initiative, the Archive Project, dedicated to helping smaller, underfunded law firms and community groups sift through mountains of historical documents. The project's motto, penned by Marcus himself, was, "Every document has a story. Some are just waiting to be read." Peter, watching from a distance, felt a profound sense of peace. His physical presence in the world was shrinking, but his legacy was expanding exponentially. He often found himself reflecting on the winding path that had brought him to this point. The initial spark of an idea, a desire to use his privilege and resources to fight for others, had become a self-sustaining flame. Jenny had taken that torch, and now she had passed a flicker of it to Marcus. It wasn't a linear succession, but a web of connections, each person influencing and uplifting the next. The town, meanwhile, was undergoing a quiet transformation. The settlement money was managed by a community-led trust. They built a state-of-the-art clinic to provide long-term care for those with health issues related to the contamination. The old factory site, once a symbol of corporate negligence, was being remediated, and plans were underway to turn it into a public park. The park's design included a memorial wall, not just listing the names of those who had suffered, but also celebrating the unsung heroes who had fought for the town. The local activists, the determined lawyers, and yes, the young student who had paid attention to a single line in a forgotten log. One crisp autumn afternoon, Peter received a package. It was a framed photograph of the newly dedicated park. On the back, in Jenny's familiar handwriting, was a note. "Peter, this is a picture of the ripple. It started with you." Peter ran a trembling finger over the words, his eyes misting over. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense, he thought. He was just a man who had decided, a long time ago, to do some good. The true heroes were the ones who carried that mission forward, who found the strength and courage to do the quiet, painstaking work that truly changed the world. He thought of Marcus, diligently working on a new case, probably poring over another box of papers in a dusty back room. He thought of Jenny, leading a new generation of law students, her voice a little louder, her confidence a little stronger, all because one man had believed in her potential. The legacy, Peter realized, wasn't a monument or a building. It was a living, breathing chain of human connection. It was the belief that integrity was a renewable resource, that every act of goodness, no matter how small, could inspire countless others. The world was still messy and complicated, but Peter knew with absolute certainty that the quiet heroes were there, and they were winning. When the party wound down, Peter took a moment to wander the halls of the building. The very walls seemed to hum with a new energy. This was no longer just a place of business. It was a monument to resilience, a physical embodiment of a moral victory. He passed by the old records room, the very place where Jenny had made her pivotal find. It was now a modern, brightly lit collaboration space, but he could still picture the dusty boxes, the faint scent of old paper, and the quiet determination of a young woman who saw value in what others had dismissed. The following day, Peter met with the board of his company to discuss the future. His successor, a brilliant and ethical young woman named Sarah, had already been leading the company with a steady hand. Peter's role had become more advisory, but he wanted to ensure the legacy of the victory lived on in the company's culture. "I want to establish a scholarship," he proposed, his voice a little hoarse with emotion. "The Robert Kellerman Archival Excellence Grant. No, it will be for students in business and information science, encouraging them to specialize in document preservation and corporate accountability. We'll partner with Jenny's organization to help select the recipients." The board unanimously approved the idea. Peter knew it was a small thing, a symbolic gesture, but it was another brick in the foundation of the world he and Jenny were building. A world where information was a tool for justice, not a weapon of suppression. Over the next few years, the partnership between Peter's company and Jenny's organization, now named the Kellerman Institute, deepened. The grant attracted some of the brightest minds in the country, and the recipients often went on to work for the institute, creating a pipeline of dedicated professionals committed to the cause. Jenny's work expanded, tackling not just corporate malfeasance, but also historical injustices, helping communities reclaim their pasts by uncovering buried documents related to land rights, civil rights, and cultural heritage. Her team used cutting-edge technology, like AI-powered document analysis and digital forensic tools, to comb through vast archives. But the core of their work remained the same: human curiosity and a belief in the power of a single piece of paper. Peter, now a grandfather himself, spent his days tending to his garden and serving on the Kellerman Institute's board. He watched as Jenny became a truly international figure, speaking at the United Nations about the importance of information access and preservation as a human right. She was often featured in magazines and on television, her story becoming a modern fable about the power of diligent work and moral courage. One crisp autumn afternoon, Peter sat on his porch, a mug of tea warming his hands, and read a glowing profile of Jenny in a national magazine. The article detailed her latest victory, the recovery of a small town's founding documents that had been deliberately hidden by a powerful real estate developer. The documents had been crucial in proving the town's land claims, saving it from being bulldozed for a new development. He smiled, a deep, contented expression. The article ended with a quote from Jenny. "My mentor, Peter, always told me that information wants to be found. I've come to believe that it's our job to be the ones who help it emerge from the shadows. Every document, no matter how old or seemingly insignificant, is a piece of a story. And every story deserves to be told." Peter felt a pang of pride so sharp it almost brought a tear to his eye. She had taken his simple observation and built an entire life's work upon it. She had found her purpose in the dusty corners of a basement, and had shown the world that quiet, careful work could have the loudest impact. The phone rang, and it was Jenny. "Peter," she said, her voice filled with a familiar energy. "I have to tell you something. We just launched a new project. We're calling it the Kellerman Legacy Initiative. It's a massive digital archive of case studies, all the successful recoveries we've made. We're making it open source, so anyone, anywhere in the world, can learn from our methods and apply them to their own communities." Peter listened, his heart swelling with pride. "That's wonderful, Jenny. You're building a library for justice." "Exactly," she said, her smile audible over the phone line. "And we're naming the first wing after you. The Peter Reynolds Wing for Corporate Integrity." Peter laughed, a rich, genuine sound. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do," she insisted. "Because none of this would have happened without you. You were the one who saw the value in a nervous intern and a box of old papers. You believed in me before I even knew how to believe in myself." This story reminds us that heroes often come in the most unexpected forms. Sometimes as a young intern whose dedication to excellence saves everything we've worked to build. It shows us that every task, no matter how small it seems, has the potential to change lives. The careful attention to detail that others might dismiss as insignificant can be the very thing that protects what matters most. In our fast-paced world, where shortcuts are celebrated and instant results are demanded, Jenny's story stands as a powerful reminder that true excellence comes from caring about quality even when no one is watching. She could have simply scanned through those old documents, filed them away mechanically, and moved on to the next task. After all, she was just an intern, working for little more than minimum wage, with no expectation that her work would ever be scrutinized or appreciated. But Jenny approached her work with a different philosophy entirely. She understood something that many people in today's workforce have forgotten. That every document tells a story, that every detail matters, and that the person who takes the time to truly understand what they're looking at might be the only thing standing between justice and injustice, between preservation and destruction, between hope and despair. Think about the ripple effects of Jenny's dedication. Because she chose to read carefully rather than skim, 43 families kept their income and their dignity. Because she recognized the significance of what she was seeing, a 15-year conspiracy was exposed and stopped. Because she had the courage to bring her discovery to Peter's attention, hundreds of other small businesses were ultimately protected from similar predatory schemes. This is the power of what we might call quiet heroism. The kind of courage that doesn't announce itself with fanfare or seek recognition, but simply commits to doing excellent work regardless of the circumstances. Jenny didn't save Peter's company because she was trying to be a hero. She saved it because she couldn't bring herself to do anything less than her best, even in a role that many people would consider temporary and unimportant. Her story also illuminates something crucial about mentorship and recognition. Peter could have simply thanked Jenny for her discovery and moved on, grateful for the lucky break, but unchanged by the experience. Instead, he recognized that he had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just the discovery itself, but the character and competence that made the discovery possible. His decision to offer Jenny a permanent position wasn't just about gratitude. It was about his understanding that excellence of character is rare and should be nurtured whenever it's found. This dynamic between Peter and Jenny represents one of the most beautiful aspects of human interaction. The moment when experience recognizes potential and chooses to invest in it. Peter had spent decades in the music industry, working with countless talented people, learning to distinguish between those who had genuine gifts and those who merely appeared successful on the surface. When he saw Jenny's work ethic, her attention to detail, her quiet competence, he recognized something that many employers miss: that the most valuable employees are often not the ones who promote themselves most aggressively, but those who simply cannot bring themselves to do anything less than excellent work. The transformation we witness in Jenny throughout the story is equally inspiring. She begins as a shy, uncertain intern who apologizes for bothering her boss with questions. But given real responsibility and genuine recognition, she blossoms into a confident professional who eventually becomes a national expert in her field. This transformation didn't happen because Jenny suddenly acquired new skills or abilities. It happened because someone finally recognized and nurtured the talents she had possessed all along. This speaks to a broader truth about human potential. How many Jenny Morrisons are there in the world, working in positions where their talents are undervalued or unrecognized? How many people are capable of extraordinary contributions if only someone would take the time to see what they're really capable of? Peter's willingness to look beyond Jenny's job title and see her true capabilities changed not just her life, but the lives of countless others who would benefit from her eventual expertise. The story also carries important lessons about the nature of corporate responsibility and the protection of small businesses. Robert Kellerman's foresight in creating legal protections for tenants like Peter represents the kind of ethical business practice that seems increasingly rare in our current economic environment. Kellerman understood that the purpose of business should extend beyond mere profit maximization to include genuine care for the communities and individuals whose lives are affected by business decisions. His decision to hide those crucial documents rather than surrender them to corporate pressure shows us what real courage looks like in the business world. Kellerman knew that protecting Peter's company and others like it might cost him financially, but he valued human dignity and community stability more than short-term profits. His example challenges all of us to consider how our own business decisions affect others and whether we're willing to make sacrifices to protect what's right. The conspiracy that Jenny uncovered also serves as a sobering reminder of how systematic corruption can operate in plain sight for years or even decades. Morrison and his associates weren't content with a single fraudulent acquisition. They had developed an entire business model based on burying legal protections and exploiting the trust of small business owners. Their scheme succeeded for 15 years precisely because they understood that most people don't have the time, resources, or expertise to thoroughly investigate the legal foundations of their business arrangements. This makes Jenny's discovery even more significant. Her careful, methodical approach to archival work didn't just solve one problem. It exposed a pattern of predatory behavior that was harming business owners across the region. The criminal prosecutions that followed her discovery likely prevented dozens of future victims from losing their livelihoods to corporate predators. But perhaps the most profound lesson of this story is about the unexpected ways that lives can intersect and influence each other. Peter had no idea when he hired Jenny as an intern that she would become the person who saved his company. Jenny had no idea when she took the internship that she was embarking on a career path that would define the rest of her professional life. Robert Kellerman had no idea when he created those legal protections that they would eventually be discovered by a young woman who would use them to expose corruption on a massive scale. These intersections remind us that we're all connected in ways we can't see or predict. The quality of our work, the care we put into our daily tasks, the kindness we show to colleagues and strangers, all of these actions create ripples that extend far beyond our immediate awareness. Jenny's story shows us that our most important contributions to the world might come not from the work we think is significant, but from the work we do simply because we believe it deserves to be done well. The 10-year celebration at the end of the story represents more than just a commemoration of a legal victory. It's a celebration of the principle that good work, done with integrity and attention to detail, can triumph over systems designed to exploit and deceive. It's a testament to the power of mentorship, the importance of recognizing talent regardless of its packaging, and the lasting impact that one person's dedication can have on entire communities. Jenny's evolution from nervous intern to nationally recognized expert also demonstrates something crucial about professional development. That true expertise isn't just about accumulating knowledge or credentials, but about developing the wisdom to understand how individual actions connect to larger purposes. Her doctoral work in business archive protection grew directly from her experience of seeing how hidden documents could be used both to harm and to protect. She didn't just become an expert in archival science, she became an advocate for justice who happened to use archival science as her tool. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary work. Share in the comments below about a time when someone's dedication to their job, no matter how humble, made a real difference in your life. Your story might inspire someone else to take pride in their work and pay attention to the details that others overlook. Remember, you never know when your careful attention to what seems insignificant might be exactly what someone else needs to save everything they've worked for. We'd love to hear about the Jenny Morrisons in your own life, the people whose quiet competence and dedication have made your world a little bit better. Maybe it was a teacher who took extra time to help you understand a difficult concept, a coworker who always double-checked their work and caught important errors, or a service worker whose attention to detail made your day run smoothly. These stories matter because they remind us that heroism isn't always dramatic or newsworthy. Sometimes it's as simple as caring enough to do excellent work, even when no one is watching. Your engagement with this story, your likes, comments, and shares, helps us continue creating content that celebrates the unsung heroes among us. Every time you share one of these stories, you're helping to spread the message that ordinary work, done with extraordinary care, can change the world in ways both seen and unseen. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in the power of human goodness and the importance of recognizing excellence wherever we find it.